Hey, good morning, everyone. I think I can see a lot of people there already.
Good morning.
You guys can all see and hear and everything. Oh, everyone's set to mute automatically. I think they've changed some settings.
They have. I can see it's a bit different in here. There's some new settings and things. Yeah.
Let me see. Play around with that in a sec to let everyone in, but I can see some thumbs up and everything going, so you can hear okay. Yeah, I think the default's changed. I might see if I can do that for everyone. Here we go. Allow mic. Allow camera. All right, everyone should be able to unmute if you want to. Don't have to if you don't want to, but should be working for everyone. There we go.
Hey, Richard.
They changed some defaults on us. All good. All right, I think everyone can hear us okay. All right, so we'll get started. I think there might be a couple more people popping in, but as always, we'll keep going through, and we record these sessions now. We'll put them up as well. Anyone who's joined one of these before, welcome back. We've had a little bit of a hiatus, but we'll be back to our hopefully monthly Lectora Product Support Sessions. Anyone who's new here, we try to do these, or we have tried to do these every month or so, just to give a bit of an idea of some different features, different things in Lectora. Sometimes it's new features, sometimes it's existing features that aren't used enough or as often enough, or just something we want to point out to people that can help you as well. We take sort of suggestions on these topics as well, so if there's anything you want to know more about, feel free to send it through to us or even mention it in the session. We'll work that into a session at some point as well. Sometimes we also get on a bit of a run and we might do a series of similar sessions depending on the topic. So as always, feel free to throw in questions into the chat if you need to as well. We will have Q&A at the end if there's any questions that you want to turn the mic off and ask as well, but we'll go from there. Okay. Alrighty, so the session today is mainly about library objects in Lectora. So I'll talk a bit about those, what they're for, how to set them up, how to use them, and how to make the most of it. So the main idea with library objects, which I'll explain fully what they are in a second, is that you can build something once and reuse it everywhere. Okay. So a couple of things we're going to look at: what they are, how to make a library object. Sometimes we have the question of the difference between copying and pasting things or using library objects. I'll point out a couple of things there as well. Obviously, how to create them, how to use them. A couple of tips and tricks on working with things like variables and things like that with library objects as well, depending on what you're using them for. And just in general, setting up library objects to create your own sort of reusable interaction library is the main thing. Over here. So what are library objects? Some of you might have used them before. Let me know in the chat if you have, or if you have no idea what they are, I'm going to explain. So essentially within Lectora, we can save something in Lectora as a library object. It can be a single object. It can be grouped together objects with different actions, variables. It can even be an entire page or an entire chapter. Anything you want to reuse again in another course, you can save as a library object, and even to reuse in the same course as well. So it's really good for common components or objects and things like that you'll use often, different types of buttons or interactions that you want to reuse. We all know that keeping things consistent can help with engagement, and you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel and sort of work through what you've already done if you've built it before, especially if it's a commonly used thing. And also if you are reusing things, you may have a precedent in a previous course of a type of interaction and you want to use it again, it's also handy to make it the same as it is in another course, especially if they're in the same sort of suite, the same branding, you can keep all that stuff the same as well. So you can even use just actions as a library object if there's a series of actions that you've set up to do something as well. Okay, and again, the key idea there is that you can build something once. If you make it well enough, the idea with a library object is that it's specific enough that it works and it's generic enough that you can use it multiple times as well. So I'll show you how to point that out with a couple of examples as we go through. A couple more things about why they're useful and why we sort of think people should be using them more. Obviously, faster development is better for everyone. You don't have to be reinventing the wheel every time. You may know how to build a 5-tab reveal interaction fairly quickly, but it's never going to be as fast as just popping one straight in if you've built it before as well. And then you don't have to redo all of the sort of work setting it up. You don't have to make sure it's matching another one. if you're copying and pasting, we'll talk about that in a minute as well. It keeps the designs consistent across different courses. Obviously, things can be reusable in other courses or even the same course. It's also really good when we start to look at collaborating between different developers as well. Everyone's got their own way of building things and working with stuff in Lectora. And if you can keep some of that consistent, it helps other people to work on courses that different developers have built, or vice versa. If you're using the same design and the same setup and everyone understands it, it's a little bit easier than having to sort of figure out how John builds something versus how Richard builds something. And if things are different as well, you have new developers that come in, they have to sort of learn how other people have built things versus keeping these a little bit more consistent. So, every time you see a certain type of interaction, you can usually guess how it's been set up depending on who's done it as well. So obviously doing support and training, all that sort of stuff, we see a lot of different ways of doing a lot of different things, and definitely consistency is key with this sort of stuff. So depending on what you're working on. Okay, so I did ask that question before, but just a question for everyone. Feel free to pop in the chat, but how many of you have built the same interaction multiple times, maybe in the same course or even across multiple courses, and you've had to completely rebuild it again? When you've done it before, and maybe you've changed it a little bit, but you've had to do it from the start, basically. Just everyone to put in something in the chat as you go through, but we'll see how everyone thinks about that. But it's definitely happened to me, and obviously working on other people's courses and our own, you see things repeat a lot of times. So depending on how you're working through stuff. Alrighty. I did want to mention before we jump in and actually build some of this stuff, the difference between copy and pasting something versus using a library object. So obviously if you're working within the same course and you've got like a common page type that you want to reuse, you can obviously just go find the page, copy it, paste it in Lectora. That sort of comes into it a little bit with variables as well. If I talk about that a bit later, about making sure that variables are different between different pages, but essentially copy and paste works better if you know where the interaction is. So of course, if it's in the same course, or it's in a different course but you've already got it open, maybe you're using one course as a shell or a template for another. That's a pretty common process that even we do as well, is using the previous course in a series as sort of the template for the next course, and you can rebuild things from there. But obviously you need access to that course, you need to know where it is. It's also good copy and paste it. You're the only person working on things because you know where stuff is because you did it. You know what it was, what course it was in, how it was built. You can sort of copy and paste and rework it from there. But copy and paste doesn't always work, again, if you've got lots of different projects, or maybe you've worked on one ages ago and you've got to try and figure out where the latest version was, who built it, where the page is. Also with multiple developers, then again, it comes into things with people building things differently or trying to work out who built this interaction in this course and how it works. And also just keeping things consistent as well. With copy and pasting, you may copy and paste some elements, but then you tweak stuff and you copy and paste it from another course. Whereas if you build up this sort of library or repertoire of library objects, things are going to be consistent as well. So it's kind of the same as setting up consistent branding, logos, banners, all that sort of stuff. It works the same for an interaction or a thing within a course as well. Doesn't mean you can't build on it and change it later, but it is also easy to keep things matching, keep things the same as you work through them. So you don't have to keep reinventing stuff as you go. Okay, just some more stuff about the difference there. Adding library objects in is really good, more so in Lectora Online, which I'll talk a bit about, where you can have sort of a global area for your library objects, so everyone sees the same list of objects as they're saved. You can still do that with desktop, which I'll talk through, but obviously copy and pasting, you need the original file. Library objects, you can just grab it from either online or wherever it's saved, and you can share those between users as well. You can even share it across different sort of departments. You can actually save it as a file, the library object, and save it and send it to someone else to be opened up, rather than having to send them a whole course for them to copy paste one page out of it or something similar like that as well. It helps keeping things standardized, so it's generic in a way where it'll work in any course, or set up in a way where it is like a template for a type of interaction where you can copy and paste something in or save it in as a library object, and all you're changing is the content, whether it be text or images or what have you. So again, it's sort of like creating a template but for individual pieces of a course rather than an entire course to use it that way. And it's a lot easier to just quickly grab and add them in exactly where you want them as library objects as well. Okay, so I'll jump in and actually show some of this stuff and we'll stop talking about it so much. And I'll open up Lectora. I'll do most of this in Lectora online, but I will explain the difference as well. So let's jump in here. Quickly, just the steps here, which I'll show you in Lectora itself. But when you are creating a library object, effectively you just need to select either the item or multiple items in Lectora that you're wanting to save. You can right click and then choose Save as Library Object, and it'll show you where it's going, and you name it so that you know where it is for next time, and you'll have a little sort of media library of those objects. So let's jump out into Lectora here and we'll have a look. Okay, so I've just got a little sample course in Lectora Online here. I've just used one of our course frameworks just to set up a basic course and some theme around it as well. And I've just got a fairly simple but pretty helpful and commonly used type of interaction, which is our sort of click and reveal. I'll show you the pieces of this first, and then I'll show you what we can do to save it and reuse it as well. So this is probably the simplest form of a click and reveal, although it's got a little tricks and things that I like to add in. And again, it's something you don't want to have to keep doing from scratch every time, even though I do that often. So even I forget to use library objects, but something we should all use a bit more. So I'll preview this page first and we can have a look. Fairly simple one, pretty basic page. We've got 3 buttons to reveal some different text. You will notice as well the next button is blocked off at the moment. If we click on reveal, show some text underneath. There we go. Reveal 3 is the same thing. Reveal 2. We can click them in any order, no matter what we want to do. We can have those appear as well. There's different types of this type of interaction, whether they show the text one at a time as you click each one, or if it reveals multiple things on the page and they stay there. Obviously, different ways of doing it. Doesn't matter too much which way you want to do it as far as the library objects are concerned, but it's very simple interaction using some variables and some buttons and things like that. And you will have noticed my next button has become active now that I've clicked all 3 of these as well. So I can go through how that works a little bit as well. But basically, we've got our 3 buttons. Each of the buttons can show a little bit of text. I've also got a little bit more happening on each one where we're hiding the previous buttons so they're not overlapping on each other. That's a nice one I like to do to keep it tidy. If they're all appearing on the page and staying there, you obviously don't need to do that part, but depending on how you want to set it up as well. I am using a variable here, so it's something that's tracking within the page. I do like to sort of explain variables every time I mention them, just for people who don't use them often, but essentially we have a way of remembering what someone's done in a course, and this is sort of a tracker variable that I'm using. So in this case, each button adds another letter to my variable. So I've got A, B, and C for my 3 buttons, and things like the next button unlocking or showing text or revealing things is based on whether they've clicked those as well. So if my variable says ABC, that means I've clicked all 3 buttons, flicked all my switches on, and it'll turn the next button on as well. So we're adding to our variable, we're showing the text itself that pops up, and we're also enabling the next button, again, based on that variable. So I can pop that conditions open there. If that reveal variable is the one I've created, if that contains all 3 letters, then it's going to show the next button for me. It's important to put these in the right order as well, and especially if you're using something that's going to be reusable, you obviously want to make sure it works in the first place. You don't want to reuse something that doesn't work, but also doing it in a simple, clean way, especially if it's for collaboration, things like that. If other people are going to use it, you'll notice I've renamed all my actions very clearly as well. You want things to be reusable and clear for anyone to pick it up and use it. And again, the order of these matters. So it hides all my little text box first. So it hides whatever other ones are appeared. Then it'll add to the variable. So it's tracking that I've clicked it. It shows the text for that button, and then it'll tick the next button off. The order here really only matters for the showing and hiding. So you want to hide all the buttons first and then show the new one. Otherwise, you may show it and hide it again. And likewise for the variable, we want to track the variable first before we do something that's based on that number. So we can't say turn the next button on if this switch is flicked and then switch it after. So obviously need that in the right order as well. But putting all that together, I've done that on all 3 buttons, obviously, and that's basically the interaction. Hiding all the text in the background as well, just to show how that works. I've actually got an action group sitting up the top here. So we can trigger that group and it triggers all 3 of these actions at once, which in this case is just hiding my text blocks 1, 2, and 3. So even though they may not all be visible at one time, I'm making sure to hide all of them first and then show the relevant one, so you make sure you never miss one. you don't know which one the users clicked last. They may have started by clicking reveal 3, in which case we don't know which one to hide, so we just hide them all. And on the very start of the page, before we do anything, I've also got an action here that disables the next button first. So a couple of different ways of doing that. You can have your buttons always start disabled, and then you trigger them to enable on the page based on something happening. We obviously sometimes want to block access to people or users before they've sort of interacted with the page, and there's different ways of doing that. But the way I like to do it is, again, based on that variable. So if I check on my conditions here, if any of these letters are missing from the variable, which when we first get to the page, they'll all be missing, then it's going to disable the next button first, at which point when we click the buttons, it'll re-enable. This also means that if I leave the page and I come back, this action won't actually happen if I've already done the interaction. So just to show that as a quick demo as well, when we first start on the page, it's blocked. Click my buttons again in any order, it unlocks the button. If I go to the next page, which is just a basic quiz page from the template, if I jump back again to my reveal page, the variable remembers that those buttons have been clicked before, and it keeps the button unlocked for me. So again, it's obviously helpful for users to have to interact with something or do an interaction before they proceed, but you don't want them to have to do it every single time they get to the page. So all that said, that's sort of the cleanest or simplest version of that interaction that I would usually make. And it may be something I want to reuse and reuse often. So obviously we can copy this page if I want to use it later on in the course. We can save this course as a template, use it again later, but what we're looking at today is library actions, library objects. So in order to save this, I basically want to select everything that's involved in the interaction. So you can just do the whole page if you want. Maybe there's times where you want to add that interaction to an existing page, in which case you can take all the actions and the objects, but not the page itself. And it kind of depends on how you want to use it. If you are doing a library object that consists of multiple pages, maybe you want to save your entire quiz as a library object and reuse it, you can do that as well. What I'd like to do in this one is normally just grab everything. I'm holding down Shift on my keyboard here and just clicking first and last stuff on the page. That selects all of my stuff together. And I can then right click, and right down the bottom it says Save as Library Object. I click on Save. You can see I've already got one there. That's basically this one I've already created, but I can give it a name and it'll add it into this library as well. Now, the important thing here when it's saved here is if you're in Lectora Online, this is saved for everyone else as well. So if you're using collaboration, people in Lectora Online can see all that stuff at the same time. That's where it really becomes useful for the reusability. If there's things that you're often doing in courses, whether it's an interaction or even just adding your completion actions at the end of a course, something that you'll usually have to do quite often, maybe it's already saved in the template, maybe you know how to do it from scratch, but just to be safe, you can have that as a quick library object to add in whenever you want. Another example of that is something that we used to have to do. I don't think it's necessary anymore, but there was a special action we used to add to make sure that the close button would actually close the window in a course. So there's an error that used to happen in the different browsers and LMS where the exit button action that you normally use does all the stuff it's meant to do and saves the course and everything, but it doesn't actually close the window, in which case you used to add a JavaScript action to close the window as well. And having to remember what that code was without actually knowing it, I'd always have to go and look up where it was, find it, type it in the correct way. If you mistype it, it's wrong, it doesn't work, all that sort of stuff. So that's a really good example of one that is a quick fix you can save as a reusable action for other things, which I don't think that one's necessary anymore, but I've probably still got it saved in my desktop library objects, I think, somewhere. So something that's handy to use and reuse. Yes, let's see Luke's comment. Luke's very well aware of that one. Basically, then we've got this saved. We can save it as well. You can also download it here. So if it's something you want to share with other users, if you're not using Lectora Online, there's a different process for doing that, but you can actually save that and send the file to someone as well. So even for a support purpose, we could set up an interaction or create something and send a library object to someone to use if needed as well. Otherwise, if you're happy with the name and everything, you can click Save and it'll add it into your library as well. If you're wanting to add a library object, so obviously we've already saved one, maybe you've saved a lot, maybe everyone's saved 10 different ones a day and you've got a bunch of different ones in your library. Over here on the side of your Lectora, you've got library objects. Pop that open, and again, this is where it'll live. So in Lectora Online, it's this one single place for everybody. You can add folders and things like that separately if you need to sort it. So it's in a separate place, but that can be organized in a little bit a different way. If you've got one that someone else has sent you, or you've got from your file, or you've saved it somewhere, again, you can import from this location as well. So it'll add it in there and start to build out your library for you as well. So pop that one out. And basically we then have that reusable library object. And again, it can be anything as simple as, even if you just want to save your heading for some reason, you want to reuse your heading really easily without having to remember the fonts and the size and the location. Everything that it remembers in Lectora will be saved into the object. So the exact position, the size of the object, the font, the color, all that sort of stuff carries across. You just got to remember things like variables and other things like that, things that exist outside of just that page itself. You can carry those over as well, but you just got to be mindful of how they migrate back into, if it's in another course that you want to work through. So if I needed to add that interaction I just made into a new course, I could always just go create new project. Hang on, I think I've got these steps up. I'll bring them up for a second first. That's creating them. So inserting a library object, we basically do the reverse of what we just did then. We open the media library, we locate it from our list, insert it into the title. If it doesn't have anything else that needs to be tweaked, again, depending on things like variables and stuff, which I'll show you in a second, then it just works immediately. It just drops in exactly as it was in the other course, exactly how you saved it, and it'll work immediately. When you are inserting them, you do have to be mindful of what type of objects you're inserting. So let me just get up a quick course to add this into, and I'll explain that a little bit further. So let's do another linear course. I'll just leave that name there. It's going to overwrite my previous basic linear course that I've done 100 times. And I'll just make a new page to add this on. I won't bother renaming it yet, but I want to put my interaction in here. We haven't even got a theme or anything on this one yet, but we can always go library objects, 3-tab reveal. I can either double click or you can import from there, and it adds it in exactly as it was, and it should still work exactly the same. Now, the only thing that this one may do slightly differently is the next button is something that we didn't carry over from the previous one. So all you would need to do is double check anywhere that that's relevant. So things like your disable next button, I go up to my action, you can see it's lost its target because we pulled that out of the other course. So we can just go here and fix that up. All the other stuff, the variable and everything will carry across. It remembers what that meant, so it doesn't need to change that. And we just have to do that for each of these little actions here. Everything else carried across with the object, so that should be all it needs, and then it should just work the same way. The hide objects, they are all carried across with it with the actions as well. So from here we should have the same thing. Blocked out my button, click a reveal, and it enables it. So everything else works there. You just got to know which things carry across and which things don't. So that's adding it into an existing course. You can see it's added the order a little bit funny. I think Lectora Online's been doing that lately. Sort of reversed everything. So I'll have to have a look at that. That's something it's not meant to do, but basically that's adding it back into another course. And again, it's reusable. If I pop back over here to my other course, again, sometimes you may have an interaction or an activity in a course and you have another page later on that uses the same activity. So obviously you don't have to have a completely brand new fresh activity on every single page. Consistency is good sometimes. You don't want every page to be the same, but if it's something like a click and reveal style, the users get used to how that type of activity works. And if it's obviously it's different content, maybe there's more or less, more or fewer sort of buttons to click, things like that, you can add it in later. Now, something I do want to talk about, which I'll jump back over here shortly, see if that was my next thing up. Yes, so I mentioned this a couple times, but it's important to know what variables are going to do in Lectora when you move things around like this. So basically, if a library object is referencing a variable or contains a variable, Lectora is going to check to see if there's already a variable in that course with that name. Okay, so if it finds one with the same name, it's not going to change it. It's going to keep it the same because it thinks, well, obviously you've kept that variable for a reason. We want to reuse it as well. And this is good in one way, because then you don't have to rewrite the variable. You don't have to add it again. It's already named logically. My one in that course was named underscore reveal, whatever it was. You don't have to redo anything there. That's going to carry over perfectly as well. But this does become confusing or a problem if you want to use it again. So if you want to add the same interaction on another page later, obviously you're going to change the text, you're going to change the buttons. Maybe if there's images involved, you'll change the images as well. But if two interactions are using the same variable in the same course, that means they're going to interact with each other, if that makes sense. So if you tick the 3 boxes, Lectora says, yep, I've done this interaction as well. 3 chapters later, where you do the same interaction, we're going to get to the page and Lectora is going to say, oh yeah, that's that same one you just did back there, because it's already ticked off the same variable. So there's a really quick way to fix that and avoid that problem. And it's sort of a good process just in general with things like library objects as well. And there's a way to do it so that you can reuse them as many times as you want. So when we're inserting the library object, we want to rename the variable every time we insert it. I'll show you where that is and how to do it as well. But essentially, think of the library object itself where we have that saved. That's got its own variable that it's going to use all the time. And whenever we add it in, we want to give it a new one for the course or every time we use it. So it's probably a good habit to do even if you're only using it once, because then you know that it's separate from the one that it came with the library object. And it'll make more sense when I show you as well, but you always want each interaction to have its own variable to use as well. So let me jump back into Lectora. I'll show you how that works. So we've got our reveal activity here. Maybe further down, I'll just give one page in between and we'll do another one. Rename my page here. Call it reveal 2. You can go in and change all the text and everything. I won't go that far, but say I want to insert my activity again. I can go to my library object. If I add it in from here now, it's going to take the same variable, it's going to use the same one, and it's going to override the other one. So before I add it in, I want to go back here to my first one. I don't actually have to go to the interaction, but if I go up to my Tools tab, we have the variable manager. Pop that open. At the moment, this is the only variable within the course that's not already existing in there. So it's the only one I've made. If you've got a bigger, more complicated course, you may have some more, but essentially this is the variable that controls that interaction. If you don't know as well, when you use the variable manager, you can find any variables you've used. You can even find ones that Lectora is using. I won't go right into that, but we find that down here, it actually shows you every instance that that's being used or interacted with. So it'll tell you what page it's on. So reveal activities here, and it'll tell you what action or interaction it's doing. So it says all the times I'm using that variable as well. If I go in here now and I edit this and I call this reveal 1, that's all I need to do. Click OK. Every time that's used in the course now, which is only on this page, it's now using a variable called reveal 1. Go to the library and I'll double click and add this in. It adds everything onto the page automatically. It's all there again. We've got a second reveal. And if I go in here and have a look what this is actually doing. So for example, if I had a look at my variable here, have a look up the top, you can see it's using the previous variable that I saved it as. So I've now got in my course, if I go back to my variables manager, I've got now 2 variables that are being used. So it saved this one from before. It's brought in the library object with the same name that it used before. So if I then go in and do this again, just to make sure it's separate and call this reveal 2, they are using 2 complete unique variables. You can have a look at what pages they're used on. Again, this one's used on this page. If I click here, it's the same set of actions, same everything, except it's a different page using it. And now those are 2 completely separate variables, 2 completely separate interactions. If I add another one the same, it's going to do it again, and it's going to have that same name. So thinking of the variable that's saved with the library object as its own thing and making a new one every time you add it in will avoid any dramas like that. Same thing goes as if you copy and paste this interaction. There's no way to account for that from copying and pasting unless, I guess I've just thought of at the time, if you copy it first, then change the variable and then paste it, it's going to work the same way, but that gets a bit more complicated. But now you've got a reusable thing, an interaction you can use again in other courses, multiple times in the same course if you want to, without causing any issues and any problems. So it is handy that it uses the same variable for you. You don't have to rename things. It's also handy if you do want to add something in that does interact with the variable for a reason that's already in the course. You don't then have to reassign all those buttons. So I don't have to go through all those actions, make sure it's pointing to the right variable. I don't have to go through all the conditions and make sure they're all using the right one. It's carried everything over. It's made a copy of it, and it's fairly easy. I've only had to change that in one place, except for when it made me copy it back in. But that's the basic thing there with variables. So only complicated if you make it complicated with a lot of different pages, a lot of different variables and things like that. But it is a common thing I've actually seen before where I could tell somebody either copy and pasted it, or maybe they did use library objects because there's multiple things using the same variable as well. And you can just do that within the same course. So rather than doing a copy and paste, you can just save it as the library object just to then add it again later on in another page, even if you're the only developer, and all that sort of stuff still applies as well. So hopefully that makes sense. That got a little bit complicated at the end there, but that's just a tip that, again, something I've run into with variables, with library objects, something to just keep track of as well. A couple other things that we've sort of already talked about a little bit, but different things of what should be a library object versus just repeating things. So I said it can be anything. You can create just a single text block as a library object, but you sort of have to just weigh up the time or the benefit of creating something again versus having something reusable. So obviously using Lectora templates and course templates, you don't have to redo things like your logo button, things like that, adding those in the course in the same way, because likely you may have a template already. But if you're using things like that, if you want to set up navigation menus that point to certain places within a course, interaction templates like we just did, so specific types of interactions, question types that you've done, if there's a question type that takes a little bit longer to do, and you just have to sort of tweak the images and text that it uses, you can obviously save those to be reused again. You could sort of set up a little, basically, list of all these library objects rather than having a course that the user uses as a template. You have your shell, but then within that you've got any type of example of every page you want to use, anything you want to reuse, and you can copy and paste into that list as library objects, which you can then just insert at any point as you go. Things like feedback pop-ups, things that are reusable within the same course, but obviously common things that are used between different courses as well. And you can also then save over them. So there's the sort of concept we often talk about with templates where you can have a living template. So as you're building something, maybe you work further on the template and you redesign a page and you like it better the way that you've done it, or there's a new need for a type of interaction and you add to that. So that can become a new library object, possibly replacing the previous one. You can also fairly quickly make multiple examples of an interaction type. So that reveal, click and reveal button option, with a template, you may have an example of that type. And then if someone else adds it in, they want to do the same thing with an extra button or one less button. And then they just have to know how to take parts out of it and add it in. Or you could create those as different library objects. So you can have a 3-button reveal, a 4-button reveal, a 5-button reveal, as many as you want to do if someone wants to sit there and make them, and save that as a reusable object that you can then use. So you can just check what kind of page you're using, what type of interaction it needs for that page, and add it in. If it's a whole page saved as a library object, it'll just add it in as a new page. If it's a series of buttons or actions and things like that, it'll add it in onto the page that you're already on as well. So that's something that just to keep track of. So the way I did it was saving the objects themselves. So I have to make a page first and then save it in. Whereas if it's already saved as a page itself, it's just added that way as well. So yeah, different types of things, different using for that as well. I did talk about this before, but naming things obviously makes them easier, especially if they are in a shared space. Again, things like what they are, what type of thing they're doing. You want anyone to be able to look at that list and know that that's the type of page that they want to use. Obviously, whether or not they're familiar with it as well, but having them named well, even just for yourself to be able to find the stuff you've made. You may have a list of 100 different library objects you want to use, and if they're all just named library object 1 through 100, you're going to have to guess which one's which and figure it out from there. But that's just a couple of things to help make those a little bit easier. But yeah, breaking down these things into different types of templates and different sections is the main thing that we've been looking at as well. Just recapping some of that stuff. I think that's the main thing we wanted to look at. But yeah, obviously using library objects help you reuse things across projects. Consistencies, sort of banged on about that for a while. Saving development time as well, not having to reuse stuff. Also, if you've got some developers that are better at using things like actions and variables and some that aren't, that can be helpful as well, where someone who sort of has set it up a certain way and knows that it works can save that as a library object, whereas someone else that may be better with the graphics and the other elements can save their own library objects. So you can lean into everyone's strengths and have that consistent library to work from as well. And just build it up into your own sort of little toolkit of different pages and interaction types that you want to use as well. Yeah, that little tip down, I've got the bottom, copy and pasting versus library objects. So it comes in often as well, but being reusable is obviously very different from just copy and pasting. Before I move on to that end part, I will just jump into Lectora Desktop and just quickly show you the same thing, just because it's slightly different. I've got this open. I've got the same course, the same project as well. Everything else looks pretty much the same. Saving the object is the same. I think I did this back in here. Adding that in to there as well. Oh, I did actually add it in from, I think I jumped back to desktop halfway through that without realizing. Let me jump over here, but adding that into the actual folder as well, if you go into the library, which we just saw before, you can actually find this location in your computer, and that can be saved as a different place. So if I right click on this and go show in Windows Explorer, it's somewhere within the files as well. So depending on your permissions, you'll have library objects as its own folder in there as well. So you've got that sitting there, and that's where you can save them. You can create multiple folders as well within that as well. Depending on where you've got that saved, we have in the past for some users, you can change that location in the Lectora settings. So you can actually have a shared drive as your library object folder. So with desktop, essentially achieving the same thing that the Lectora Online does, where it's all going into one place where everyone can see that as well. So a little bit more to manage on the desktop side of things, but for the people that have to use desktop and can't use online yet, there may be a way to do that and still have that same benefit as you go through there, building up that way as well. So depending on what you want to set up there, you can work through that. I believe it's in preferences. I don't want to go right into it, but pretty sure. No, I won't go right into it. Oh, it's right here actually. Yeah. So media library folder, that's where that stuff lives. So that can be changed to a global area if you do want to. So everyone using desktop will then have to do that. Sometimes there's permissions of whether your Lectora installation can access shared drives and things like that. So IT may have to get involved with that, but it is possible to do that the same way within desktop as well. Outside of that, we definitely, as I said, always welcome more ideas for different topics, things like that. If it's something we can work as part of a session or maybe as a whole session itself, we can sort of work towards that. Always happy for ideas as well. Again, we're trying to do these monthly, so we'll hopefully get back to that now. And if not already, I think I'll share the link with everyone else, but we did have the recordings all done up through our sort of YouTube space as well. So you can get to any previous course and have a look at the content there as well. There's an overall page for that, which I'll set up, and usually within the week of doing a session, we'll have that one up as well. So I'll work through fixing those up and make sure everyone's got access to that. If you miss a session, or if you have to jump out early, or if your friend missed the session and they really wanted to check it out, I will have that sort of set up as a bit of a repository in future as well. Thanks everybody for coming and welcoming us back to the sessions. So we'll go from there, but hopefully that was good for everyone.
Thanks, Will.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.